Hi, Olivia. We're going to talk about your paper here. If you would please just follow along with me as I go. You should see the cursor with the yellow circle around to give you an idea of where I'm at. First thing, this formatting right here with Olivia and then your domestic violence, what does it cause? You can go ahead and get rid of that. We're not going to need that. You'll have a title page that we're going to work on tomorrow, which will take care of everything. As we jump down here, I told you before, your introductory paragraph, I think, is really nice. It's interesting. It pulls the reader in. It gives me a sense of where you're going. As we come down here, you're talking about the different resources that are available for people who suffer from domestic violence, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the Hotline for Harley House. These programs reach out and help those who have dealt with domestic violence and are in need of treatment, safety, and ultimately the desire for freedom from their abuser, not the freedom of their abuser. Um, Wonderful. And that's a nice little introduction. It gives me a sense for where this is going to go. You're going to talk about the different resources that are available for people with domestic violence issues, as well as to tell me what these things offer. Now, what I would like from you is some sort of a thesis. Explain to me that you think that these services are sufficient or aren't sufficient for the problem, if more needs to be done, or if more even needs to be provided in terms of communication access to these different things, which is to say that the resources that are available are great, but we just need to make sure that people are aware of what these different things are, maybe make sure people are aware of what the definition of domestic violence itself is. Anyway, um, each of these services listed above hope to limit the effects of domestic violence on wives, children, etc. Good. Drugs and alcohol can also be contributing factors. Excellent. And then you come down here and you start to talk somewhat about your personal story. This is fine. Um, I've been thinking about this some more, and I think the best way for you to deal with this is to don't just say on 4th of July, 2016, there was an incident in Small Home, Maryland. I think you should go ahead and just say this is your story. And then if you do that, it becomes a reason for why you, the author, are interested and care about this. It also goes ahead and it states your position so that you don't, so the reader doesn't feel like you are biased. If you're acknowledging your own situation, then the reader themselves can say, okay, this person is self-aware. They understand what's going on in their connection to this. So I would say actually go ahead and let's change up that first line. Let's just go ahead and admit what the connection is here. I think that's actually the best way to do things. And then we come down here. The Child Advocacy Center in Frederick, Maryland is one of the various major resources. Good. Um, Excellent. You did an interview with Lynn Davis. I think this is great. And then she comes down here and actually explains some of what's going on when it comes to the question of how it impacted the victims of domestic violence. Lynn said kids and young adults who have experienced domestic violence often also experience trauma. Wonderful. Now that gives us a reason to talk about trauma, which goes back to the beginning and discusses effects. The problem that we have here, though, is this section right here. Also, kids and teenagers who have experienced domestic violence have a more likely chance of becoming more violent and be intertwined in abusive relationships themselves. Wonderful. I actually think that that would go toward the beginning, and you could use this to talk about why anybody should care about this. And if you had made the comment, if we change the piece at the beginning where you admit about your own story and then say, my own story does not bias me in this case. My own story actually simply concerns me because I know that people who are victims are themselves more likely to become perpetrators. Then that becomes a reason that lends credibility and weight to your story. So I think actually going ahead and combining these two things would make your story that much more powerful, or your research paper that much more powerful. And also you need to pull this up here. This quote should not be separate from the remainder of this sentence. Now, this is an interesting statement that you make right here because there is no way to stop domestic violence because of its complexity and the amount of things that we don't know yet. I think this is actually a really interesting point because one of the things that's discussed in gun violence narratives a lot is people talk about how it's important to take guns out of the hands of people who will use them. And to do that, we should have more mental checks or mental health checks. We should in some way be aware of who should or should not have access to weapons that could potentially hurt people. What you're saying is it's impossible to know that because there are so many different causes of something like this. I think this is actually a really interesting argument and probably an honest argument, to be honest with you, and one that you should explore a little bit further. I think this is really interesting. Good. I like what you have right here. All right, so I guess what I would say is at this point, what are your complicating issues? What is it that's stopping places like these different programs to help people who suffer from domestic violence, what's stopping them from being more well-known in the community or providing better services, or what is stopping us from identifying domestic violence writ large? I think that you need to talk about these complicating issues. You have identified the problem. You have talked about possible solutions for the problem. Now I think you need to get into complicating issues. Right now you're on like page, what, 3 of this thing, page 4 as I come down to right here. So if you jump into complicating issues and then review it all at the end, I think you're going to have a really nice paper here. Caroline, Olivia, that's the one thing I would tell you to add to it. Make sure you get into those complicating issues. Why is it that more help is not available, or the right help is not available to the right people? Other than that, I think you've done a really nice job with this. See you tomorrow.